Well, good morning and welcome everyone to today's digital dialogue. Happy holidays. Today our conversation is titled The Future is Now, the Current State of America's NEVI Program Rollout. My name is Josh Boone and I'm Velos's Executive Director, and I have the deep privilege of welcoming you all to today's really important conversation. The Velos team is excited to bring you a group of action-oriented leaders from the EV ecosystem to discuss the nationwide advancement of the electric vehicle infrastructure plan, next steps, and more. As we look to 2025 for new developments at the national level, we're eager to learn from today's speakers about the current status of the NEVI program, learnings, and future opportunities for transportation electrification. And before I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd encourage you all to stay on until the very end of today's webinar because Velos has a little 2025 program teaser for you all. So that brings us to our keynote guest, Gabe Klein. Gabe is the Executive Director of the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, where he oversees efforts to align resources and expertise across the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Department of Transportation. Through their work, the Joint Office is able to support programs that seek to deploy a network of electric vehicle chargers, zero-emission fueling infrastructure, and zero-emission transit and school buses. Previously, Gabe served as the Commissioner of the Chicago Department of Transportation and the Director of the Washington, D.C. Department of Transportation, where he revamped technology platforms and government processes while focusing on putting people versus cars first on city streets. Gabe also founded CityFi, a consulting firm to help city leaders, chief executive officers, and others understand the complexities of 21st century challenges, help facilitate people-centric solutions, and use new models and technology-based tools to deliver optimized results. We're so excited to have him with us today, so please join me in welcoming Gabe to the digital stage. Welcome, Gabe. Hopefully you're able to get in. Good
Yes, thank you,
afternoon.
Josh. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here. I'm going to let you kick off with your presentation. Again, just thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. And it's just going to take me a second to get this thing going. All right. Are you seeing my presentation?
We are seeing your presentation, but you might want to switch modes because you're in, we can see kind of your next slide.
Let's see. How about now?
Perfect.
Better?
Yeah, you're dialed.
All right. Well, Josh, thanks so much for having me. Thanks to Velos for all the great work that you do. It's exciting to show up with an organization like yours that takes such a unique approach and really does the tireless work of bringing together all the stakeholders involved in the e-mobility ecosystem. And, that's a lot like what we're doing here at the Joint Office. So we appreciate those complementary efforts. And for those of you that don't know, the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation is really a unique startup in government. As Josh said, we sit between the Departments of Energy and Transportation to align the expertise in these areas and to give Americans more choices in how they can get around with zero emissions. So I'm here today, not to talk about all of our work, but to talk about progress in the NEVI program that builds out fast charging along our nation's highways and freeways. But I can't bring up NEVI without also mentioning the complementary charging and fueling infrastructure program. We call it CFI, that installs charging in communities where people live, work, and play, as well as, of course, our 10% set aside. Some of you may know about the EVC ROB program, which is a replacement program for older chargers. We also support the FTA's low-no emission program and EPA's Clean School Bus program, and we have our own funding opportunities. And so it's an important time to talk about the future of these programs. We'll do that today. But before we do that, I also want to just take a look at the past. We went from being formed 3 years ago by the IIJA and came into existence on December 14th, 2021. So happy almost birthday to us. In our first year of existence, we did some monumental work to establish the federal minimum standards for EV charging, approving the first state plans for the NEVI program, and creating the EV working group to connect with the industry. In our second year, we convened the National Charging Experience Consortium, or ChargeX, to improve the charging usability, if you will. We awarded the country's first NEVI contracts. We put out funding opportunity for community charging, charger repair, and more. And almost exactly 1 year ago, on December 13th, 2023, I had the good fortune to be there when the first NEVI station in America opened in Ohio, unleashing some incredible momentum there that hasn't stopped since. And so just think about that for a second. Just 1 year ago, there were no charging stations funded through NEVI or CFI opened in America. And now, actually, if you include all of the various ports across the program, it's actually well over 200 over the last few years. So it's gone up since we did this deck. Whoops. And actually, there's a more updated number. So today we've got 13 states operating charging ports, over 240, and a massive amount are in construction. We've got actually more than 24,800 federally funded ports underway nationwide. These projects are in a variety of states, reflecting the bipartisan importance of EV charging to create more jobs, give people more choices. And actually, Texas and Michigan open stations this week. New Mexico has several coming. So there's a ton of momentum, and it's really exciting to see. Even more exciting news, we have some news today. NASIO and AASHTO, with our support, released a NEVI dashboard that's open to the public. Very, very exciting. There's a QR code we added up there, so you can just use your phone if you want to check it out. It includes sites that are open, as well as sites that have been conditionally awarded. You can also see state plan approvals. You can see funding allocated, states that have issued solicitations, and total funding awarded. So it's at evstates.org/awards-dashboard if you want to take a look. And let us know what you think. I also want to recognize our own joint office team that set up the EV chart reporting platform for federally funded stations. So we now have highlights of the data that we've received. And obviously, it's a limited number of stations, but it's growing every month, every quarter. And it shows the number of charging sessions. It shows energy served, and electric miles driven, thanks to fuel from these stations. And so we've got more than 4 million miles traveled already. So after all that, what's next? Well, we've doubled the number of chargers in the US. Actually, when we came into existence, there were about 95,000 chargers. Now, as of today, there's 205,000. It was 204,000 something yesterday. And these chargers are giving people more confidence to make the choice to go electric. Also, EV sales are up 16% over 2023 and October 24, and continuing to grow. More than 6 million EVs have sold cumulatively in the US to date. And there's more choices. We have more EV models available. The Chevy Blazer and Equinox are out. The Honda Prologue is a hit. Toyota's got the BZ4X, and Subaru's got their version of it as well. So there's a lot of models coming from automakers raising interest among consumers and giving them more choices in the type of vehicle that they need for their household. And charging access is expanding in some really incredible and important ways. Many of you probably saw the news, I think it was just last week, on the universal plug-in charge. There's a lot of things that go into that. The Joint Office helped to develop the J3400 standard for the NACS connector, which was initially developed by Tesla. So now it's out there in the open. Anybody can use it. Multiple automakers have committed to making vehicles available with the J3400 port starting in 25. And several vehicles already have access to Tesla charging with adapters like this. Actually, this is a picture of a Blazer EV at a supercharger. I believe this week Nissan also gained access. So this means more charging locations are available to more drivers. Charging is getting simpler. And as I was saying, just last week, we announced universal plug-in charge with SAE, and that is available now to the CPOs and automakers, enabling any car to plug into any charger and start charging with seamless authentication and payment. And you'll start to see that really rolling out this next year. So it's going to be huge for EV adoption, making it easier than ever to make this choice, and will also lead to other innovations like true vehicle-to-grid integration. So in closing, we've come a long way, but obviously there's a lot more to do. The Joint Office has funding awards coming out soon for community charging through our Communities Taking Charge program, which builds on the Ride and Drive Electric funding released earlier this year. The focus of these programs is really to support the level 2 community charging. That's the mainstay or backbone of charging, and to advance electric mobility in key areas, including local delivery fleets, managed charging, workforce development and interoperability testing, and more. And this really complements the NEVI program, which continues full speed ahead as all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico have submitted and received approval on 2 rounds of EV charging plans, unlocking nearly $2.4 billion in NEVI formula funding to fund the construction and operation of charging stations. And as of last week, 47 states have received approval on their 3rd state plan, unlocking an additional $726 million in FY25 funding. Looking ahead, you'll see there's a picture up top for a webinar, the J3400 connector standard and adapters, and the opportunity to include those at NEVI stations is going to be huge. And we have a webinar coming on this topic next week for folks who want to join. So please check that out on our website. And I just want to close with a note that changes in administration may bring changes in priorities. This is a natural part of our democratic process, but the Joint Office will continue to address priorities across the departments of energy and transportation. And we will, adhere to the IIJA and continue to deliver on that mission. And we'll keep working with organizations like Veloz that have made great tools available, like Electric for All, that help people better understand what's involved in the choice to go electric and all the options available to them. And I'm really proud of my team, what we've done, the momentum that we keep building with organizations like Veloz and SAE and others. And just thanks. And thanks to all of you for dialing in and listening. And over to Steve and Josh or Josh.
Well, thank you so much, Gabe. And I just want to just send you a huge congratulations on all the work that you've done at the helm of the Joint Office. I think in many ways, just getting the Joint Office set up in and of itself is a really innovative federal government approach. And at a high level, being able to double the charger since 2020, the universal plug-in charge approach, the best practices that you all put out on a regular basis, and just the excellent coordination and communication have tremendously helped all the collective work of organizations like Veloz to promote EVs. So just a huge congratulations and thank you personally from my desk to yours. So we look forward to working with you and everyone on today's webinar as we continue the EV momentum across the country into 2025. So you're welcome to stay with us. Have a wonderful holiday. I think Linda from your office is going to be on the panel in a little bit. But with that, I'll let you go and I'll intro our next presenter. So Steve, welcome to Veloci's virtual stage. Steve is the electrification consultant at Plug and Play EV, which is an organization dedicated to helping EV owners learn the ins and outs of driving electric and bringing a business in the sustainable transportation space to a wider audience. Today, Steve will be framing our conversation with an overview on state build-out throughout the NEVI program. So welcome, Steve Birkett.
Thank you, Josh. Happy to be here. And thank you to Gabe for all of that exciting information. I'm eager to go and jump on the dashboard myself now. But yeah, as Josh said, I'm Steve Birkett with Plug and Play EV. I'm primarily enjoying helping EV drivers get out there and test the infrastructure, and wanted to bring you today a little look at NEVI on the road, which is what I've done a lot of this year. Been focused on how the NEVI program is kind of changing the electric vehicle charging infrastructure across North America and the United States specifically. In my trips, I've traveled more than must be 20 or 30,000 miles this year alone. I have 150,000 plus miles under my belt, and the NEVI program is starting to really fuel some of those miles. So I wanted to bring you some of my experiences and travels today. So just kind of to delineate some of the portions here, as Gabe was talking about, there's been 3 years now of the program, and a lot of that has gone into the planning, consultation, and eventually awards phase, which we'll touch on a little bit in what I want to share. But I've focused a little more away from the office and actually on the ground, which is my travels across the country and looking at what is getting into the ground. So we're a year out into the first location that opened in London, Ohio, a little west of Columbus. That's the construction phase, the activation, and then moving into the operations and maintenance piece, all of which are the kind of crucial where the rubber meets the road for EV drivers out there every day. So this is the map that looks the best, I guess. It's the planned progress of all of those awards, and the stuff that is being announced starts to spread across the country. We see these are sites that are planned, have been announced, but are not yet under construction. So naturally, that has the most pips on the map, which we're all excited to see. You can see it stretching across from my area. I'm up in Boston, Massachusetts. So New England has a bunch of these. We spread out across the Midwest into Ohio, which is one of the leaders of NEVI right now, as we'll get on to, Pennsylvania. But getting across the nation, you can see it becoming, all of these are potential charging locations, 4 ports, 150 kilowatts, all of the minimum requirements that we have come to know and expect from these stations. And you can see the progress of the states getting out there and starting to make their first rounds of awards, some of them moving into second rounds, and then really getting into the kind of business end, which is the construction side. So myself, the start of this year, I had been to about 50% of the NEVI sites, which was fairly easy to do when there's only 10 to 15 out there. But the first one I visited was over in London, Ohio, as Gabe showed the ribbon cutting on his presentation. So you can see that to the left there. That's my Hyundai Ioniq 5, getting a session in on a nice sunrise actually there, early in the morning. A little bit less friendly weather up there in Pittston, Pennsylvania, but another site that has gone in early. I think that was activated late in December last year. And then the New York Power Authority and the Evolve New York network starting out with a site in Kingston, New York. But I think this, the Drive Ohio slide here really represents kind of the early mover advantage that some states like Ohio, New York, and Pennsylvania have. When they started their awards early, they announced Ohio back in, I believe it was July 2023. And they've moved quickly to get stations in the ground, broke ground in October 2023, had a site up by December, and then really started to push through the rest of this year, as we'll see. But both of them, Ohio and New York, had previous plans in place, state level plans, even that precede NEVI, and that has really set them up for early success in kind of fusing those preparations to the actual funding from NEVI and being able to kind of catalyze those programs and get those charges in the ground a little bit quicker. So we move on to the stuff that really excites EV drivers, where the locations are activating and the sites that are actually in progress. So here we have the construction really starting to accelerate. We have I think it was 39 by my count. They're opening so often now, every day, or every other day. This week alone, we've had sites in Michigan, Texas, and Wisconsin, actually, I think in the last 24 hours has gone live. So we're adding more and more of these states to the map. And that at the moment is 39 sites active in 12 states, but then there's another 10 states with construction you see here. Those are the kind of orange construction pips, and then the purple are the ones that have been activated. So you can see a heavy cluster of those first mover states in the Northeast and Midwest, but also moving over to Utah, sites in Texas, over in Hawaii, some of the early sites went up. So we're really starting to spread out, and that construction is really starting to catalyze the opening spree that we're seeing in November, which was triple the largest month previous, and 15 sites open, and hoping to see a similar amount this month in December. But then we kind of move from the construction side, shovels in the ground, to charging sessions. And this is a little bit of a disclaimer that when the sites break ground is not necessarily the same as when a site or a Department of Transportation says that it's underway, but the turnaround times from roughly when construction is starting to the first sessions are starting to come out here. So if you look at the first 39 sites that have been activated, the turnaround time from that kind of first sign of construction to actually starting a charge is 117 days. So you start to get to 3 or 4 months on the average, but then on the quick side, you have states like Hawaii, which have managed to turn around a site in 27 days, started and finished in Kahului down in February, into all the start of the month and to the end of the month. They had that site broken ground and up and running and charging cars by the end of February this year. So that was probably the most impressive so far. Some of the longer timelines have extended to 200 plus days, but it's very site specific and really depends obviously on the hardware and the contractors, what they're facing on the ground. And then as far as where they're opening, 58% of sites activated so far have been at truck stops or gas stations, which begins to make sense when you think the initial phase of the NEVI program is really trying to fill gaps, get travel corridors and alternative fuel corridors covered. And that's where a lot of these sites are finding power, finding the vendors to put these in at various truck stop chains, gas stations, all of the usual places we're familiar with. And EV drivers are eager to see these, even when a charger is coming up on the map and maybe hasn't been officially opened yet by the ribbon cuttings that we saw in Gabe's presentation. They will start trying to charge these. So this is from a site down in Pennsylvania, where ChargePoint has activated that Loves, and you can get there. It is roped off, but that does not deter EV drivers from starting a charge. And then some of the advantages of these sites going live, starting to fill gaps. I traveled across the country from the Northeast here over to Washington State and back this summer. So started to see some of these locations. What you see in my mirror here is the kind of junction of I-70 heading over to Utah and just into Colorado at Grand Junction. And one of the NEVI awards is going to be at this Pilot Flying J in the background there. No construction yet, but starting to fill those gaps between the places in Utah that people want to visit and back to Denver on I-70 heading east. And that's really the kind of core of this first phase of NEVI, really. As I've traveled across the country, starting to see gaps be filled in, whether it's by sites that are under construction or just from here, you know, looking out from the Northeast, seeing the first activation in Texas there. You're starting to see those gaps fill. Amarillo to Lubbock, 123 miles, putting a site where it was in Happy kind of cuts that down the middle. And there's another site going in Plainview, which is going to aid that as well. Snowville, Utah, a site that I drove past and checked out. No construction back in August, but is under construction now as we speak. And that's going to bridge 133 miles between the south side of Idaho and Salt Lake City, Ogden, Perry, that kind of front range area in Utah. And that's the kind of area, as I drove through, saw no services signs all over the place. So there's really not much there, but there will be EV charging thanks to NEVI in the next few months here. Rockland, Maine, another example, and the Adirondacks of New York. Great work being done by the Evolve New York team to build out there and take advantage of that first mover status. And then on the other side, we've seen Rhode Island fully built out with its couple of stations at the park and ride locations in July. New York, as I mentioned, has accelerated and been able to really capitalize with NEVI funds, the roadmap to fully built out status with its Evolve New York network. And the great team at New York Power Authority doing some good work there. Ohio, with that first mover advantage, is close to finishing its 19 sites from round one, 14 months after they broke ground last year. And Texas has a statewide plan. I think another site went live today officially in Gainesville, Tesla Supercharger, and another 23, I would guess, which is 2 active, and those 23 under construction are underway or in progress to cover across the whole state of Texas. And what does that do for local areas? I mean, we've really heard about the travel benefits of the NEVI program and funding and filling these gaps, but it really helps the businesses as well. Obviously, we have local chains that are starting to benefit from these, or national chains in terms of your truck stops and some of the locations that have been getting these stations. They've been rolling out on a national basis, but it's also something that helps local businesses. The site in Happy, Texas is a local restaurant called Lunchbox, which is recommended by locals and something that I know people will be happy to stop at while they charge. Then you have Frontier Town Gateway up in North Hudson, another of those Evolve New York stations, which is going to open up the Northway and the route up to Canada for drivers heading up to the Adirondacks. And then you can see this site here, one of the ones I stopped at, one of my favorites actually, down in Moab, Utah, one of the few places that actually offers fast charging there. Gives you really, really good location to hit Arches National Park, Canyonlands, a bunch of different sites around that area, as that report from Cody down in the bottom here recommends. 10 out of 10, pristine bathrooms, all the things that EV drivers like. And it's really just emphasized here with a bunch of reports from across the country in the last month or so. You have folks checking in all across PlugShare, and thank you to them for sharing these, but all the kind of experiences that people are having, whether it's filling gaps, trying local businesses, people concerned in some cases about, whether they can get a charge started, and then stuff like auto charge, plug and charge starting to work away. So lots of positive reports as you go through the listings for various providers, including Francis, as we'll talk about later, with this Casey's, Cridersville, great location and great charges. So takeaways, really, as I say, we're starting to make some real progress here. We've got states that have shared their clear plans. We've got 2/3 of them having made NEVI awards or conditional agreements. You have these announcements turning into construction sites and momentum, with about half of the states having those sites activated or under some kind of progress. Activation's accelerating beyond those early mover states here in the Northeast and the Midwest, out to the Western states, Southern, all over the place really now across the country. And then the J3400 standard starting to deploy in those stations in Texas and Wisconsin, which augments the CCS1 kind of existing infrastructure and starts that transition to the new standard that we'll see next year. And then moving on to that is the kind of what to watch for, from at least my perspective, in 2025. Start to see those early mover states convert more first round funds and move on to the next phase of deployment as they hit fully built out status with all of their AFCs covered. West Coast states, which have been a little bit absent from the conversation so far, will start to move and get those construction rolling out with awards that turn into stations. The switch to J3400, as I mentioned, really expect to see activations start to spike, all that construction starting to become real activation in the second half of the year, and then the increased utilization and wider range of NEVI funded stations that are coming there. I think the responsive operations and maintenance services are going to be critical as we move forward. So I hope that was useful to you. I've certainly traveled a lot of the country this year and really appreciate the opportunity to share some of those travels, and really appreciated the NEVI program and its locations. So yeah, if anyone has any questions or wants to dive deeper, happy to do so.
All right, well, thank you, Steve, for your presentation. It's been super helpful to hear from both Gabe and yourself on the status of the NEVI program. For our audience, my name is Rosa Davies. I am Veloz's Business Development Director, and for today, your moderator. Steve, I just have time for one question for you before we hop to our panel. Sure. On your shovels to session slide, where you talk about the 117-day turnaround, Are you seeing any trends? Are there certain charging providers, operators, utilities, cities that are faster than others?
It's really been the owned and operated truck stops have been very good at turning these things around, where the locations where they own the property, they know, they have established contractors who we all know the names, I would guess. We see them on the construction sites every day. Those truck stops are really doing a great job, and the gas station chains of turning those sites around.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. All right, I'll keep watching your progress and reviews of future NEVI stations. Before we do panel introductions, a quick note for our audience Q&A section, which will be at the end of our dialogue. Please place your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Don't forget to include who your question is aimed towards, as well as your name and affiliation. The Veloz team will be selecting 3 trending questions throughout the panel discussion, and those will be routed to me during the lightning round. Our audience Q&A will take place closer to the top of the hour. All right, now, without further ado, let's get started and meet our panelists. Today, I have the pleasure of talking about NEVI with 3 individuals who represent organizations on the front lines implementing and administering this pivotal funding. Susan Coskey, President and COO of Francis Energy. Linda Bailey, Program Manager for Technical Assistance for the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, and Colton Brown, Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Coordinator, the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. All right, let's get you all on screen. Okay, it was nice to see you. All right, now let's start with Susan Coskey with Francis Energy. Francis Energy is a leading charging network in installing NEVI-funded charging stations. Susan, those of us who have worked on project that requires funding compliance know that the paperwork involved can be a burden. What are some obstacles or complications you are hoping get solved in future rounds of NEVI from various states? This can range from applying for funding through being awarded NEVI funds. Somewhat separately, I'm also curious on how NEVI funding has impacted decisions on which plugs or connectors get installed.
Well, thank you for including us today. I appreciate that. Before I talk about what might be better, I want to talk a moment about what is good.
Sure.
And I would be remiss not to acknowledge some of the other panelists here, because we've had incredible support from Pennsylvania and DOT. So Colton, thank you to you and your team. And obviously, Linda, we've engaged a lot with the Joint Office. And I think there has been a lot of support for what is basically a new program. And sometimes we forget about that. It's new for the states. It's new for the federal agencies. It's new for the Joint Office. And so we're all working together to try to figure that out. We do appreciate early adopters like Ohio. We have 4 operating NEVI sites now. And thank you, Joe, for your call out in the slides that we just saw. In Pennsylvania, we have 3 that we hope to go online soon. And we are working well with that state as well. So there is a lot of positive. We do think there are areas where there might be some challenges and things that we might be doing differently. And we come from the perspective, Francis Energy is based in Oklahoma. We electrified that state every 50 miles, about 2019, 2020. For us, that meant leaving no community behind. And that's part of what our goal is, to make sure that there's no red states, blue states, there's no socioeconomic barriers. It's very consistent with what we think is the purpose of NEVI, and that really is the mission of our company. So when we are looking at where we're going to put the network, NEVI is very helpful for us because it enables company like ours to be supported in increasing our network. So what are some of the challenges? We right now have awards in 20 states. We are the largest recipient right now of awards. There are federal requirements for awards, and then each state has their own requirements. And sometimes meeting all of the state-specific requirements can be challenging. Some of them are adopted from construction-like projects, may require things like bonding or other things that may not work for a program that really, from, as you saw in the earlier slides, from construction to operation is a very short period of time. So it would be certainly helpful if there were more opportunity to align state requirements with federal requirements going forward. I think another thing is that in NEVI itself, there are prohibitions about when you can start spending funds. So we may get a NEVI award, but we can't spend funds until we get the P3 agreements or notice to proceed. In that interim period of time, when we saw the 117 days average from shovel to operation, that doesn't take all the days before you get to shovel. And there are a lot of built-in delays at this point because you need to wait for your contract before you can purchase plans, before you can purchase equipment, before you can engage with the utilities in a way that expends funds. And if there was an opportunity for award to enable us to start moving forward with expenditures, then it would really truncate some of the process and get us to that 170-day marker much sooner.
Great. And then I don't know if you have a note on the decision around connectors, but also as a follow-up and keeping it with you, Susan, and you somewhat answered this question, has the NEVI program sped up or slowed down your network expansion, and why or how?
100%. It's sped it up for us because it enables us and supports us in building the network. Francis Energy is about charging. We don't, we aren't a travel station and sell things and have chargers. We aren't using, our whole business is to provide charging, to provide the choice for people to be able to have electric vehicles. If we build it, they will come. So for us, we can work with other entities and help them build chargers and still be part of a network. However, when we get supported, whether it's through NEVI or other funded programs, we are able then to continue to build this contiguous network. It's what we did in Ohio. It's what we're trying to do in Ohio. It's what we did in Oklahoma. What we're hoping is that once we have the highways built out, we are very much looking forward to the rounds of NEVI where we can start going into communities that may not otherwise be able to support their own charging networks. We do a lot of work in rural communities, tribal communities, and the like, and that will help us again to increase our network into areas that may not naturally be putting in chargers.
Yes, I completely agree that that type of expansion is also very much needed, and I hope we can get to that expansion soon.
The one thing I would also just say is that when you talk about the idea of adding multiple connectors, that does increase costs. It does increase in installation time. It doesn't mean it's not something that we should or shouldn't do. But I think everything that we're adding, we want to make sure that we're understanding the implications for how we are then being able to install the network.
Yes, absolutely. Smart investments. All right. Thank you, Susan. I'll circle back with you in a minute. Going to move on to an individual with state-specific experience in this area. Colton, how has the state of Pennsylvania's experience come into play here as you begin to administer the funding? What are some of the top lessons learned and best practices?
Sure. So first, my background is that I was with our state's Department of Environmental Protection for a few years working with our Volkswagen settlement funds for charging installations. So I came to PennDOT early in the NEVI program to help with that. So having that experience, and even before that, I had different experience at PennDOT. So having a little bit of the federal DOT rules, expectations background, and then also having charging infrastructure, working with charging company background was something pretty unique to us. And I think it helped us have a fast and successful program at that initial launch. In terms of lessons learned and best practices, we've done entire presentations solely on lessons learned. So that's a very, very big topic. I would say just to big high level is there's a lot of different players and pieces that you need to put together to have a successful program. You have to have people who know your state procurement law, you have to have your federal partners, you have to have some knowledge of the EV industry, some knowledge of the EV charging industry and companies and how they approach things and what matters to them. And it's a lot of different experience and backgrounds that you have to get together, working well together to make a successful program. And there's a lot of subcategories of lessons learned within that, but I'll leave it at that for brevity.
All right. Well, thank you, Colton. Linda, hopping over to you. Glad the Joint Office was able to spare you for the hour. We've heard from the state's perspective, and Colton will keep hearing from your perspective. Now let's hear from the federal side. Lots of people are very eager to know what we should expect the NEVI program to look like next year. Should we be keeping our ears perked for some changes, or can there be a collective exhale and know that we're charting forward as planned? Our understanding is that about 80% of the funding has already been allocated to the states. What's the fate for the last 20%?
Yeah, so hi, nice to be here today. I guess I would start by saying this is a formula program that goes through the state DOTs, Colton's agency, and 51 others, so all 50 states, plus the district in Puerto Rico. So it's a formula program. The states have already received, as you noted, 80% of their funding. The final year funding would come due next fall on October 1st in 2025. I would just say we don't know how everything will be treated, but I will say that I don't believe formula funding like this has been rescinded in the past. So I'll just say that. And there's no guarantee anything can change, of course. But a lot of this money has already been obligated in the system, which is kind of like those interim steps before you get to actually spending an actual dollar. People think of money as like dollar bills. I always say this is funding, not money. So you have to do a lot, as I think Susan was saying, before you get to the dollar bill in the hand kind of moment. So there's obligation has occurred for a lot of the sites that are needed for the network in the states that are pretty far along. We have a little over 900 award sites at this point across 36 states. 37 states, I think. I'm not sure if I have the right number, but I think it's 36. In any case, all of those awards have already gone out, and those states have made commitments on behalf of the federal government, effectively on behalf of the federal money, I should say, the federal funding. And I expect those all to be moving forward through the process. And I don't expect that anyone would want to kind of take that back out of the state's hands, out of the private sector's hands, like Francis Energy, who've already put, as you noted, effort in before they can get paid even. Which I know is unfortunate, and that's one of those things. It's a reimbursement program, so it can be different and difficult for different states. So I would expect steady progress, barring something that really has never happened before, I'd say, which is that the apportionments that already went to the states being changed. And this is part of really the whole federal highway portfolio, which is quite large and is all based on that same system where there's an apportionment to the state obligates it for projects, and then they expend it like pretty much all through the private sector. So I would expect it to continue. I'm excited about the program. I think it was great seeing Steve's road tripping slides and just seeing, like, we've really seen a ton of increase in operationalizing stations just in the last couple of months. We knew that there was a lot happening before you get to that point for the last year and a half, at least. And of course, Pennsylvania is one of our states that's right out in front, which is great. But just obviously for the public, until it's actually open, it's kind of just an abstraction. So I get that. But like I said, we have a total of, I want to say 900, a little over 900 stations awarded right now by states. So, and that's a lot of work going on the field. I do want to kind of just mention that we're also part of a big push overall to encourage also private sector investment in this site. And I think Gabe mentioned this, but we've seen the total number of ports available to the public, not even NEVI, of course, per se, double from 100,000 to 200,000 in the last few years. So that's been huge. And I think it's really providing a lot of momentum in this field that is going to pay off in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take that as small exhale to medium-sized exhale. All right. Well, thank you for that, Linda. We're going to circle back. Back to you, Susan. Francis Energy has done a lot of work around the U.S. as it comes to the NEVI build out. Securing land or rights to land is a critical component of building out charging infrastructure. What other variables do you consider when deciding whether or not to pursue a site? And then what NEVI qualifications, whether they're state or federal, are attractive and which ones dissuade interest?
So obviously NEVI has a lot of requirements itself when we are trying to secure a site. So we start there, and then each state also has requirements as to what we need to do to secure a site. So initially with the NEVI sites, it's pretty prescriptive. When we are looking more in areas where we anticipate beyond the corridors, that also ultimately I think will be part of NEVI. We are looking for areas where we think that there will be accessibility. We obviously look at potential utilization, but that's not the guiding factor. We're trying to create, I keep saying that, but contiguous availability of charging so that the availability of charging is not what keeps people from purchasing or using EV vehicles. So, you know, are there amenities? Is it safe? Where are we putting it? Even when we have particular sites, are we thinking about where someone like me by myself is going to charge in the middle of the night? And am I putting it in a corner somewhere? Or am I thinking about the safety that people are using it? When we think about where there might be potential for vandalism or not vandalism, and how can we, you know, do things like that? Those also can be handled by cameras, other things. We like to put sites where big rigs are not going to run over the charger, which has happened to us as well. So I think we have to look about strategically where we are placing them. And then finally, I think it's really important for us, consistent with our mission. So for example, just to use a couple of examples, some of our sites, for example, in New Mexico, one of the places that we put a site happened to be a place that sells chicken sandwiches. What we learned from that site is that the chicken sandwich consumption at that site increased once there was a charger there. And the idea that there was an economic development impact for where the charger was something we hadn't thought about, but something consistent with our mission that we are able to contribute to. Where we've put some sites in some of our tribal partners, we haven't just put them in casinos, but we've put them at daycare centers or food banks, and we've combined solar, where we can now have access and really help the community in a way that's not just a sort of a drive-through charger. So for us, it's community-based, it is commercial-based, but it's really looking at what we can do to expand and leave no one behind who wants to have access to this network.
Well, I really applaud you, Susan, for that thought process into charger placement. That's really refreshing to hear. Linda, Colton, you're next. The NEVI program is a large billion-dollar program. Do you think market players who are active in multiple states can smartly absorb and invest this capital? I've seen the list of who has already won in Pennsylvania, and while I recognize some of those names, some of them are either new to installing EV fast charging or are an entirely new organization. And the reason I'm asking is because we've all seen the headlines that poke at deployment being too slow, technology requirements or capabilities being outdated, and of course, uptime abilities. So restating a bit, do you think the market is capable of using this funding wisely?
Well, I certainly think that the private market is best positioned to use this funding wisely. They're the ones who have, you know, a vested interest in seeing the success of the station. They're, you know, if it was just a PennDOT run charger, we would just be maintaining it along with all of our other assets, and it wouldn't be, you know, the focus on that, a charger user experience and driving up utilization and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we give the market a little bit of time. You know, we haven't released all of our NEVI funds in one funding opportunity in one time for a reason, because, you know, these companies are scaling up as well. But, you know, even the projects where, you know, you may not recognize the name of the companies receiving award, there's somebody in that project team who only does charging, and that's what they're thinking about, and that's their profession. Whether they're a big national company or smaller, it's still their focus. It's what they know, and you know, that's going to drive them to keep up with the technology and the plug types and all that sort of stuff. They want to see their station be used. They're trying to, you know, have a long-term investment and profit from it, and a good customer experience is what's going to drive that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of dedicated, mission-oriented folks in this group, and I agree. So Linda, back over to you now. You're next. So we focus on the majority of this conversation on NEVI, but I'd like to touch on some other EV industry and consumer touch points. Our audience is curious on what project you project will happen to other investment incentives like 30C, which offsets up to 30% of depreciable costs in low-income census tracts. And for the consumers, what is your prediction for that $7,500 consumer tax credit under the Trump presidency? You are probably aware that last month Newsom committed to restarting an EV incentive program if the federal tax credit is eliminated. Is EV adoption momentum going to shift heavily to the states?
I really can't comment, unfortunately, on what the new administration will do. I will say, I think, you know, continuity is really important for businesses in terms of tax planning. And the changes in the tax code, as you observe, could just change people's plans in general. But on the consumer side, to me, what I see when I look at this space is a lot of momentum. More than 6 million vehicle EVs have been sold in the US. There's a lot of different reasons to buy an EV. In many cases, they can be cost savings that come through fuel economy, depending on the space that somebody's in, what their electric rates are, and what the fuel rates are like in their location. There's some very remote areas I know we've talked about at times where importing liquid fuel like gasoline and diesel is quite expensive. And there's plenty of, like in really remote Alaska, for example, there's plenty of local power to be had through hydropower, for example. And so there's other places where this economy might really make sense for people. And there's also other reasons that people buy vehicles besides saving money. They also buy vehicles because they like them. I happen to own an e-vehicle, and it's really fun to drive. And I don't know. I don't know that people talk about that all the time, or in my space, we talk a lot about energy savings and all these things, but it's like, it's also like, it's a great car and it does everything you want it to do. And that's mostly what people are buying things based on. So I think, I think there's a lot of momentum overall.
EVs are fun to drive. Colton, looking for insights into the evolution of administering this funding. Can you tell us a bit about what you wanted for your first rounds of NEVI to focus on versus your later rounds? How has your strategy changed from implementation in 2022 to now? And are you working with other states as your strategies evolve?
I mean, I just like, as Susan was saying earlier, we really want to get to the community charging. That's a big equity concern. It's what we want to be able to do with our funds, but the program rules say that we have to, create this network across the interstates designated roadways first. So as long as we're doing that, we're going to do it well. Is kind of how we approached this from the beginning. So, right off the bat, we opened up basically the whole state. All of our interstates where we needed projects, chunked them out, and said, this is where we're looking for projects. But if people are going to be using this network for long distance travel, we focused it on, locations that are going to be good for that 20 or 30 minute stop. We didn't just want to put them in the middle of nowhere where we have a network, but it's not very effective, or it's not good for the drivers who are using it. So from that first round, really, we've had 3 funding rounds so far. The later 2 basically just got smaller and more targeted to where those gaps remained along the highways, because we're just focused on working towards that build out certification so that we can move into the community phase of our project, of our program. We have this year, earlier this summer, fall, released what we call our community phase framework, which is kind of laying out, this is what we're thinking for those remaining NEVI dollars after the highway rounds are done, when we're able to move into the community phase. So we haven't been able to do it yet, but we are really thinking about that, and the strategy and the approach is going to change a lot. And we already have our local planning partners currently in the works of gathering feedback from their communities and their locals, so that we can kind of build that up into regional funding opportunities when the time comes to get into the communities and have those projects be successful as well.
All right, thank you. Linda, we're down to our last question. The Joint Office has been critical in working between federal and state funding for EV fast charging. As we move into the next administration, and I know you said you couldn't really comment too far in advance, but as we move into the next administration, do you see the Joint Office positioned to continue the momentum of supporting the build out of a nationwide fast charging network for EV drivers?
We're continuing our work, and I think it's really, we've seen a lot of success in the Joint Office, and I think it's a unique kind of role for government because we're kind of in between 2 massive networks, being energy and one being transportation, for example.
Yeah.
We kind of are bridging a huge gap there in terms of knowledge of one another's strengths and weaknesses, in a way you could say, or like where to do stuff. In other words, like the utility map doesn't match the road map in exactly the way we might like it to for perfect charging opportunities. Anyway, so I think we're really bridging a gap there and providing a service that also, we've done a lot of work to try and bring in the voices of industry as the folks who know, as I'm sure Susan does, what things cost and how to get things done, which is really important if you have an implementation program, which is what we're talking about here, not a theoretical thing at all. So I think it's been really a great office, and I certainly think it will continue, but we'll see.
All right. Well, thank you, panelists. We are going to have one lightning round question for everybody before we get into our audience Q&A. For our audience members, make sure you get into any questions you might have into our Q&A box, and be sure to like any existing questions that you'd like to see answered. All right, for our panelists, in 3 sentences or, give or take, what is your biggest hope for the NEVI program and EV industry at large in 2025? Steve, I'm going to start it off with you if you can come back on camera. Then if you can pass it over to Susan, Susan to Colton, and then Colton to Linda.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think my most exciting hope for next year will be to see the transition that we expect from the whole network typified by NEVI. So all of the providers coming together to unite around a certain standard to have plug and charge is probably one of the biggest pieces. It's just an exciting advantage of electric vehicles to be able to plug in, have everything handled in the background, and then just go and do everything that you want to do at that stop. So I'm excited to see that come to fruition in 2025.
One, for the states that have already been participating in the program, please keep doing it. We appreciate all the work that's doing. For the states that have not yet issued any kind of solicitations, please issue. We are ready. And I think looking to the future, we are very much, I think, to some of the points that have already been made, looking to going off the corridor, not only through the NEVI and other programs, but also hopefully with the private sector, as I think, Linda, you had mentioned, seeing the value and helping to really fill the gaps so that we accelerate how we really bring greater accessibility of the EV charging across the country.
Yeah, I would say that I know that the NEVI program is going to just have kind of exponential progress in the days and months to come. And part of that comes from knowing our own number of sites that are very close to operational now compared to how many we currently have out there. So I think really my hope is just that our federal partners continue to have and be able to provide us the same level of support, and that we don't have any new obstacles to utilizing our NEVI funds and deploying them as quickly as we would like to.
Great, and I'll just end by doubling down on that. I think you're going to see a huge increase in stations operational under NEVI, and I also think there are certain thresholds of utilization, meaning number of consumers using a given station that you pass, and suddenly it makes a lot of money, and there's also the spin-off economic effects. I think there's kind of there's going to be these little levels of momentum that kind of go up over time as we pass those thresholds, and people start kind of realizing this is a great investment, for various reasons.
All right. Well, thank you for that. That was just enough time that I could quickly scan the Q&A box. So first one goes to Susan. This is from Brad. Love your examples of how Francis Energy charging stations brought more commerce to local site partners. What % lift in revenue did retailers see after chargers were installed? And second, are you seeing any demand to tie into rewards programs or other promotions from local retailers?
Let me start with the second first. Yes. And that's something that we're working on right now. I know that is something that we really need to focus on in all aspects of our charging. As far as the first, Steve, I'm sure you have that data.
Should I re-say?
Yeah, you'll have to go back and say, sorry.
Any increase that you are seeing for retailers? We have stories about it, more than chicken sandwiches. We do understand that there is a significant benefit. We have not yet quantified it in a way that I could share X percentage. And so, Steve, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, there are studies out of MIT did some, but that was locations in California more than anything else, that when a charging station is installed, businesses within a certain distance will pick up. Anecdotally, I know I've spent a lot more money at Walmart's over the last few years because that's where Electrify Americas go. But now that they're going into these locations, as I say, the local businesses, and as they start to get away from travel corridors into some of the local communities, I know here in Massachusetts, Deerfield was one of the first sites that we had for the CFI grants. We visited that and spent some money in the local community. So not data specifically, but I think we do want to get those kind of programs that have, loyalty programs and start to tie to local businesses to the charging activity, because we know anecdotally that this is happening all the time. There is an uplift to local businesses when people stop to charge.
I think, as Steve mentioned, with the CFI programs and those applications, obviously there is a proposal in those that it is going to increase local businesses and utilization and the like, and we participated and received grants with those programs as well. But I think that's a much more comprehensive story when you're doing a CFI application right now, that you're already proposing what you think the uplift might be.
Yeah. Agreed. This next question, thank you, Susan. This next question's for Linda. You're popular in this Q&A box. I'm not sure if this next question is for your desk or for somebody on the state level, but the question's about status of NEVI in California, and it's coming from Janet. There has only been one cycle of awards to date. What are the chances for rural areas to participate? California is one of the later states to get a jump start on NEVI.
All right, great. Yeah, California has, as I understand it, has future rounds set for NEVI for corridors. I would look at the corridors, as I think Colton was noting, one of the requirements of NEVI is to first create a station at least every 50 miles along the specific corridors that have been designated, and then go on to do anything else off corridor, which there can be great reason for, but that's just the way the program was set up to go. So as I understand it, California has at least a second round that should be released. If not already, then it should be released soon, like a solicitation. And then I would say to look at the corridors in your region and the Mendocino COG, and also to maybe just reach out to the state. California has a really mature electric vehicle charging program compared to a lot of other states, but that does mean it's more complicated, and it might be honestly more helpful just to try and find the right person who can take your questions and give you all the details about what's going on in your region of the state.
Great. And then this next one, Colton, you can answer it from a state perspective, Linda from a federal perspective. But how do you project the progress of NEVI following the administration change from 2025? So administering of funds, are you going to do anything next year that wasn't done this year? Colton, I don't know if you have a quick response there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the projects that are already underway, there's no change that can happen there. Really, it's just new funding rounds, getting build out certification, moving into our community rounds, getting those funding rounds available. That'll progress at the pace it's going to, unless there's changes to existing guidance or protocols. So as is, things will continue until and unless something changes them.
That's a really good summary. Until something changes them, they'll continue the same. I will say that, just to reiterate, there's the last year of funding for NEVI has yet to be apportioned, which is the formal step in which it's kind of given to the states to put in their budgets. And that just can't happen until FY26. So that starts October 1st, 2025 is when that fiscal year starts.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for those funds that we have, but have not been released in a funding opportunity, they would still need to be obligated before we can officially put them in a funding opportunity. So that's another step that requires federal approval.
Yes.
And that kind of segues me into this last question, which was directed for you, Linda. Can you describe this is from Maureen. Can you describe the administration's approach to deploying funds in the next 30 days? Is there going to be a huge push to get cash out the door?
we've been pushing really hard on this program for at least the last 3 years. So I don't know how much harder we can push. I will say that we're just trying to tie up loose ends just because new appointees will come in and have to approve certain actions, and it just takes, at best, people are drinking from a fire hose in those first days. So we're not expecting immediate actions, or we're not planning for them to take immediate action. Obviously, they can take the actions they choose to, but in terms of looking for approvals or things like that. So we are trying to tie up some loose ends, for sure.
All right, thank you. And then Susan, another question just came in for you. Charging vandalism has been happening in Pacific Northwest. I live in Portland, you know, and parts of other states as well. Is Francis Energy seeing vandalism on their network, and how are you approaching or dealing with this issue?
We have been fortunate in not seeing that much vandalism to date. Obviously, it is something that we are very well aware of and that we are continuing to work toward trying to prevent and address. But it is not the significant issue for us right now as we have seen elsewhere, but it is way on our radar.
Okay. Is there something that you're proactively trying to mitigate against? Do you have solution ideas for if, I mean, I don't want it to happen, but if it were to happen to your network, do you have a kind of a plan in place?
Are you saying to a charger or to the network?
To the station, to the charger.
We have security cameras. We have better lighting placement. We have better placement, you know, visible placement for the chargers. There is technology in terms of how you start to make more vandalize proof the equipment, and we're looking at that as well. It's not necessarily part of the requirement of this, but we work with our equipment suppliers all the time to see how we can continue to improve and address issues.
All right. Well, thank you. As we wrap up our discussion for today, I'd like to once again thank our panelists for joining us to talk through the status of the NEVI program. And of course, a special thank you to our keynote speaker, Gabe Klein. It's been so wonderful having you all join our conversation and look forward to the important work you'll be doing in the coming months. So have a great day and rest of your year.
Thank you.
As a reminder to our audience, we will be sending out a recording of today's conversation as well as a transcript through our newsletter. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Before you start to hop off, I just have a quick announcement followed by a teaser video of sorts that I think is worth the extra 80 seconds. In 2025, Veloz will be implementing our strategic plan of national expansion, coupled with the nation's first EV education and awareness consumer campaign by a third party. If you're interested in joining Veloz and supporting our efforts, please email me. It's my name, rosa.davies@veloz.org, or find me on LinkedIn. I want to take a moment to heartily thank the generosity of our Veloz members, companies who provide the funding that allow us to put on our summits, digital dialogues, and other events. If you are not a Veloz member, these programs like our digital dialogues and our communications working group are part of membership, and we invite you to become a member. Speaking of events, please be sure to stay tuned for our 2025 roster of events. Veloz will be publishing some of our 2025 events, and you can bet that EV policy, total cost of ownership, and light-duty EV fleets will be on the airwaves with executive voices from across the US. In addition, stay tuned from Veloz as we embark on planning our educational campaign. So now we're going to stop the recording. That's a cue to the person behind the scenes. And with our 2025 trailer teaser for our next Electric for All campaign, everyone, happy holidays.
When it comes to driving broad national EV adoption, the time is now. The investments have been made. The infrastructure is being built. Americans are choosing EVs, and the technology, charging, and savings are improving at lightning speed. This is the part of the EV story when things get really good, because now the reality has caught up to the dream. The beginning was exciting. Now is, dare we say, way more fun. Not to mention more powerful, more efficient, more affordable, and more accessible. paving the way for an electric for all future. There's a reason more people are starting to believe, because electric vehicles aren't new anymore. They're now, and they're for everyone. The benefits of EVs are undeniable. So get in, keep the momentum. The time is now. The vibe is electric. Join us.